First story. My parents brought my toxic brother to my wedding after I banned him, so I kicked them out to protect my peace. Weddings are supposed to be one of the happiest days of your life, a celebration of love, commitment, and the people who truly matter to you. That's what I envisioned for my wedding to the woman of my dreams. But no matter how much you plan, some people will always try to make everything about themselves, even on your special day. That's exactly what happened with my parents, who decided to bring along the one person I explicitly told them wasn't welcome, my estranged brother, Ethan. Let me give you some background. I'm Sam, 29M, and my relationship with my brother Ethan, who is 35, has been nothing short of toxic. Growing up, Ethan didn't treat me like a sibling. He treated me like a punching bag. He would torment me constantly, mocking me, belittling me, and even resorting to physical bullying. While other kids had brothers they could turn to for support, I had someone who seemed to take joy in tearing me down. My parents never stepped in to stop it. Instead, they dismissed it as typical sibling rivalry, brushing aside the emotional scars it left on me. By the time I hit adulthood, I realized I didn't have to put up with Ethan anymore. I decided to cut him out of my life entirely 5 years ago. It was a hard choice, but it brought me the peace I desperately needed. Of course, my parents never saw it that way. For them, Ethan's behavior was long forgotten, water under the bridge, as they'd say. They've spent years trying to guilt me into reconciling with him, throwing out cliches like family is everything and people change. But here's the thing, Ethan hasn't changed. And even if he had, I've learned to prioritize my own well-being. Fast forward to my wedding planning. My now wife, Rachel, and I agreed from the beginning that Ethan wouldn't be invited. This wasn't a spur-of-the-moment decision. It was about protecting the joy and peace of our day. I told my parents clearly and firmly that Ethan wasn't welcome. I even went as far as warning them that if they tried to bring him, they'd be asked to leave. My parents gave me the usual song and dance about forgiveness, but reluctantly said they'd respect my wishes. I should have known better than to trust that promise. The day of the wedding started beautifully. Seeing friends and family gathered to celebrate our love was overwhelming in the best way. Then, as I was greeting guests before the ceremony, I saw them, my parents, walking in with Ethan by their side. My stomach dropped. It felt like a punch to the gut, like all the boundaries I'd worked so hard to set had just been trampled on. I didn't want to cause a scene, but I couldn't let this slide. I pulled my parents aside and asked them what they were thinking. My mom, Linda, gave me this condescending smile and said, "We couldn't leave him out. He's still family. We thought once you saw him, you'd change your mind." Change my mind? On the day of my wedding? I couldn't believe their audacity. I told them flat out that they had two choices. They could leave with Ethan, or they could leave without him, but under no circumstances was he staying. That's when the guilt tripping began. My dad, Mark, accused me of being overly dramatic and ruining my own wedding, while my mom turned on the waterworks, claiming I was tearing the family apart. It was textbook emotional manipulation, and for a brief moment I felt the weight of their words. But then I reminded myself why I'd made this decision in the first place. This day was about starting my new life with Rachel, not about pandering to people who didn't respect my boundaries. In the end, I stood my ground. My parents stormed out with Ethan in tow, looking like they were the ones who'd been wronged. It was a tough moment, but once they were gone, the ceremony went off without a hitch. I married the love of my life, and the rest of the day was filled with nothing but happiness. For that, I'm grateful. But of course, the fallout didn't take long to arrive. My parents have been bombarding me with calls and messages, accusing me of humiliating them in front of the family. Some extended relatives have chimed in too. While a few support my decision, others think I should have kept the peace for just one day. Even a couple of my friends suggested I could have handled it quietly by letting Ethan stay and simply ignoring him. Rachel has been my rock through all of this. She fully supports the decision I made, reminding me that boundaries are there for a reason. Still, I'd be lying if I said I wasn't conflicted. Did I overreact? Should I have just let it slide to avoid the drama, or was standing my ground the right thing to do? At the end of the day, I know this. My wedding was about celebrating love, trust, and the future Rachel and I are building together. If my parents couldn't respect that, maybe they're the ones who need to take a long, hard look at their choices, not me. So, was I wrong for kicking my parents out of my wedding? Or was this simply the price of finally standing up for myself? Second story. Father-in-law insists on arriving at 1 a.m. during the holidays, ignoring my family's needs. What happened when I refused to let him disrupt our peace will shock you. The holidays are supposed to be a time of joy, family, and togetherness, right? But for me, this holiday season has already begun with a pretty serious dilemma, and it all revolves around one person, my father-in-law. Let me give you the rundown of what's been happening. So, my father-in-law, who lives in Florida, decided to come up to visit for the holidays. Now, I've never been the biggest fan of extended stays, especially when it comes to family members staying with us, but I agreed to it. 3 weeks. That's how long he's staying. A little long for my taste, but I kept my mouth shut and thought, it's the holidays. Let's make it work. But then came the part that really got under my skin. When he told my wife he was planning to drive up this weekend and his estimated arrival time was 1 a.m. Yes, you heard that right. 1 o'clock in the morning. Now, for those of you who don't have kids, let me tell you something. Getting kids to sleep is an art. You can't just waltz around the house making noise at any hour of the night without consequences. We have 2 young kids, an 8-month-old and a 3.5-year-old. The guest bedroom he'll be staying in is right next to their rooms. My concern is simple. I don't want him showing up at 1 a.m., waking everyone up, and turning what should be a peaceful night into a chaotic mess. It's not just about him arriving at a ridiculous hour. It's about the domino effect of waking up the kids and disrupting the whole household. So when my wife told me what time he was planning to arrive, I didn't hold back. I told her flat out that 1 a.m. was completely unacceptable. I suggested that he either leave earlier or take a break along the way and get a hotel to avoid arriving at such a late hour. She was trying to push back a little, but I stayed firm on this one. No one, especially not a guest, should be showing up at that time and causing unnecessary disruption to the family. Here's where it gets interesting. While my wife was speaking with her dad about the timing, I kept quiet, not wanting to escalate things. But when my father-in-law responded to my suggestion by saying, "There's another way of looking at this. A man coming to visit his family," I could feel my blood start to boil. Essentially, he was implying that I should be grateful he was coming to visit us at all, as if we were somehow lucky to have him grace us with his presence. At that point, I couldn't stay silent any longer. I had to step in and say, no, 1 a.m. is unacceptable. This isn't about being grateful. It's about respect for our family's routine and the kids' sleep schedules. Of course, he didn't like that. His response? "You're entitled to your opinion." I could tell he wasn't backing down, and honestly, neither was I. The conversation got heated, with both of us saying things we probably shouldn't have. But in the end, he reluctantly agreed to arrive at a more reasonable hour, even if he didn't exactly appreciate my stance. So here's the kicker. Now my wife is trying to make me feel like the bad guy. She's guilt-tripping me, saying I'm being unreasonable and that I should have just let him come whenever he wanted. I'm starting to feel like I'm the one being painted as the villain in this whole scenario. Now, I want to know, Ada for making my father-in-law adjust his arrival time to something more reasonable? Was I being too harsh, or am I justified in wanting some peace and quiet for my family, especially with 2 young kids? I'm really struggling here, and I'd love to hear what you all think. Third story. I turned our guest room into a nursery for my baby. Now my dad says I'm a terrible host, and my sister took his side. My husband and I share a cozy 3-bedroom apartment. It's been our home for a while, and we've worked hard to make it both functional and comfortable. The master bedroom is where we sleep, and up until earlier this year, the 2 additional rooms served as a guest room and a shared office space. That setup worked perfectly for us, until life brought a beautiful change. Our first child was born in October, and with his arrival came the need to reorganize. After some discussion, my husband and I decided to turn the guest room into a nursery. We did consider giving up the office instead, But with both of us needing that space for work, me for occasional freelancing and him for his hybrid job, it made more sense to keep it. The office is our little sanctuary of productivity, away from the chaos of daily life. And since we rarely have guests, we figured that if someone did visit, we could easily set up a mattress on the floor in the office. It seemed like a reasonable compromise. Fast forward to now, Christmas is just around the corner, and my father, who lives in another country, is planning to visit. He hasn't met my baby yet, and I was thrilled at the thought of him finally getting to see his grandson. The last time he visited, I was pregnant, and he stayed in the guest room, which was still intact back then. Naturally, when he called to confirm his plans, I assured him he was welcome to stay with us again. I explained, however, that the guest room was now the baby's nursery, so he'd need to sleep in the office. That's when the conversation took an unexpected turn. My father asked why we hadn't chosen to convert the office instead of the guest room. I calmly explained our reasoning, that the office was crucial for our work and overall sanity, especially now with a baby in the house. I thought he'd understand, but instead, he got irritated. His response was curt. "Whatever, I'll just get a hotel," and then he abruptly hung up. I was left stunned. Was it really such a big deal? He'd only be here for a short visit, and the office was perfectly capable of accommodating him. The next day, he sent me a text, and things escalated further. He called me selfish and inconsiderate for prioritizing an office over a proper guest space. He even went as far as saying that he hadn't raised me to be such a terrible hostess. According to him, expecting guests to sleep on a mattress on the floor was downright offensive. As if that wasn't enough, my sister chimed in, siding with him. She insisted that I was in the wrong and accused me of disrespecting our father. Now I'm caught in this whirlwind of guilt and doubt. My initial decision, which seemed so logical and fair, is suddenly under scrutiny. It's hard not to feel conflicted. On one hand, I know my husband and I made the best choice for our family's needs. Our home isn't a mansion, and we had to make sacrifices to ensure it works for us, especially now with a baby. On the other hand, I never intended to hurt my father or make him feel unwelcome. I wish he could see that this isn't about disrespect. It's about practicality. So here I am, questioning whether I should have handled things differently. Should I have anticipated that my father would see the lack of a guest room as a slight against him? Should I have offered to make alternate arrangements or done more to ensure his comfort? Or is this just a case of unreasonable expectations on his part? In the end, all I want is for my father to feel loved and valued. But I also believe that my little family's needs have to come first in our own home. Is that selfish? Or is it just a reality of adulthood that not everyone will always agree with your choices?